There we go. And welcome to another version of this Tom Green podcast. This week has been pretty hectic. I was going to have an NBA and NHL final show for you, but busy work happened. But we do have a guest on this show for this week. I got to meet him in Chicago at Section 108. Shout out to the Chicago Sports Bums and from the 108, friends of mine here in the show. His name is Reggie Duvalsaint, also known as Reggie the Beer Guy. Reggie, great to have met you in Chicago, and good to see you on your travels, and glad you could stop by the show for a little while.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we met at the White Sox. I know they're going through a rough stretch right now, but I hope that they turn it around at some point. But shout out to everybody at the White Sox. Thank you so much for having me the other day, and thank you to Miller Lite for bringing me on. So appreciate that.
There you go. Absolutely. So, according to your, first of all, according to your Instagram profile, his profile is Reg the Beer Guy. Check him out on IG. You visited 27 of 30 Major League Baseball stadiums and 29 of 30 NFL stadiums. So, you've probably gotten this question all the time, but we'll ask it here on the show. Rather than asking you about the stadiums you have visited, I'll ask you about the stadiums that you have not visited yet. What are those?
Sure, absolutely. So for baseball, I'm only missing the Twins, the Red Sox, and the Toronto Blue Jays, which will probably be the toughest one because it's international and you got to work on getting the visas and all that process. So those are the big three MLB I'm missing. And for the NFL, I'm only missing the Vikings. So almost there to get the all 60 there.
Yes, absolutely. And looks like you'll be planning a trip to Minnesota sometime this late summer, early fall.
Yeah, that's certainly in the works for sure. As well as Fenway, of course. I do want to get to Fenway.
Oh, yes.
So I am knocking on those doors actively.
Absolutely. And the more stadiums you visit, even though you visited just about all of them, the more stadiums you visit, the more people you get to know, the better chances you have at opening the door to different places. That's kind of what I've found out throughout my networking, and what I'm sure you're finding out throughout there is, as you probably know, I've been around a lot of different reporters in the business. Naming a handful: Jenny Taft, Laura Rutledge, Katie Engelson, Jess Blaylock, and a few different others that I've met. Julia Morales in the business, Tim Brando, John Paul Morosi. There's a little bit more than a handful that I've been around the business, and like I said, networking is huge, and doing this to get to all the stadiums is great for the both of us, I guess.
Absolutely. Like I said, you're 100% right. Just making connections with all the teams and all the different managements at each park, and so that they know you, they understand what you're trying to do, and they've been very helpful so far. So that's the name of the game, like you said.
Absolutely. So, well, we'll kind of tap into how did this all start? I mean, I'm sure that when you were growing up, you probably had a vision, as I did, and a lot of others do, of visiting all these stadiums, and of course, we've seen that it's kind of come to fruition this way. So, let's tap into how did this come about?
Yeah, well, like I said, growing up, I was a huge sports fan. I actually was a Met fan. I mean, flash forward to now, I live in Philadelphia now, so the Phillies have grown on me a little bit. So this series in London this week is pretty interesting to me. I gotta say, I'm a Philly fan now, but I grew up a Met fan. I always loved sports, loved baseball, love football as well, and I always wanted to, be a part of the game. You could say I wasn't really a good football player or a baseball player. Tennis is probably my best sport to play, but I always knew I wanted to be involved in the game, and I loved the different stadiums. And to me, baseball was the most unique because every ballpark has different characteristics to it, and every ballpark plays differently as opposed to a different sport like football or basketball, where the designs may be different, but the layout is always the same. To me, the unique layout of each ballpark was always something that stuck out to me.
Absolutely, and that's kind of the thing about Major League Baseball is that, and even and I'll be honest, I cover on the prep level here in the state of Michigan, and each baseball stadium and softball stadium has different dimensions, and that's something that I think draws a lot of interest with baseball fans, and makes things different because like we'd see on Statcast a lot. This this fly ball by Mike Trout would have been a home run in 7 out of 30 MLB ballparks, or this bomb
Right.
by Aaron Judge would have been a home run in all 30 major league parks. So the different
Mhm.
dimensions make things interesting.
And like I said, growing up in New York, you would hear a lot about the short porch at Yankee Stadium and balls that would go out at Yankee Stadium that wouldn't go out at other parks, and how players would dream to left-handed hitters would dream to be playing at Yankee Stadium. So just the uniqueness of each ballpark always intrigued me. And also, I also love although there's not that many baseball stadiums anymore that convert to football, I always loved how they were able to modify different ballparks to fit football and baseball in there, and how hockey and basketball go back and forth in arenas. That to me was always cool. Just seeing that in person sometimes, even today, now, is impressive.
Two ballparks that definitely come to mind are now it's called Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, where the Marlins had played until Lone Depot Park was built. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, God rest its soul, into starting next season, the Oakland Coliseum, where you would get a true vision of how a ball from third to first is thrown, where the yard markers were set at the Oakland Coliseum versus where
Right.
the baseball diamond was set.
Exactly. So, like I said, as a kid, that always intrigued me, just how quickly they were able to make those transitions and to see, what actually goes into them. So,
Definitely. So, well, now that you've been at 27 of 30 Major League Baseball, 29 of 30 NFL, what are some of the best moments that you've had, whether it's sports moment, whether it's interacting with the fan, or what are some of the best moments that you've had at the stadiums that that you've been able to sell at?
well, like I said, last season during the playoffs, this memory always sticks out to me. Working the Phillies wild card game last year, and I had a fan who I seen pretty regularly at the ballpark at Citizens Bank come up to me and say he wanted to purchase beer for the entire section that he was in. So to be a part of that and to experience that live was quite the experience. Like I said, he purchased beer for the entire section, and like I said, I was in disbelief, and a lot of the fans that were actually there couldn't believe it initially. They were like, "Oh, I don't really want a beer," and I'm like, "Well, no, it's complimentary. Somebody purchased this for the entire section." And to see the joy and the jubilation in that section, on top of the Phillies winning and everything going on that day, it was just that to me was probably one of the most memorable experiences of vending that I've ever had. So,
Gotcha. And so now that you're kind of becoming a Philly fan, I've heard a lot from different networks and different people that Philly sports are just a little bit different. I'm sure that you can attest to that.
that's right. Well, like I said, I think Philly has that reputation certainly, and partially it's earned. I can't say it's not. Philly does get that reputation, but I will say this though: I feel like other markets that are larger, I feel like New York would kind of have a similar reputation, or Chicago, if they weren't split per se. If there was one team that the whole city rallied behind. I feel like in New York and Chicago, you have White Sox and Cubs, you have Yankees and Mets, which kind of splits that a little bit. But like I said, Philadelphia is a large enough market where I feel like they could potentially split them, but the whole city is rallying behind the Phillies and the Eagles, and it's something special to see.
Absolutely. And they'll let you know when they're discontent there in Philadelphia.
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely, 110%. They're not afraid to speak their minds. That's for sure.
definitely. So now, of course, the proverbial question is, we know that traveling from place to place, I've seen that you've flown places, but where do you or how do you get all that? Have you saved a lot of cash, or do you get a lot of the sales, or how is your travel? How are your travels funded? I guess I'll ask it.
Oh, like I said, a lot of people ask the same question. I think that is probably the most difficult part of this whole process and this journey. But like I said, a lot of planning is involved in the travel, the logistics of where I'm going to stay. And many times it's months in advance sometimes. As of right now, I'm already building my calendar. I'm looking at August, September, and October. And I tell everybody my favorite day of the year is when the calendars drop. So when the NFL schedule drops and when the MLB schedule drops. Those are my favorite 2 days of the year. I can kind of break it down and look at, get a glimpse at what I want to do and kind of put everything on paper. And as the dates get closer, kind of wean out certain events and tailor my schedule a little better. So a lot of planning is involved, booking travel, booking flights, and just making sure that it logistically works. Sometimes there's delays and there's cancellations. There's nothing you can do about that. But
Right.
so the planning aspect is the hardest part. The actual vending, to me, comes naturally. It's easy and it's fun. So the toughest part of this whole journey is the planning and the logistics for sure.
Yeah, and that's something I've thought about with the few different jobs I've had, from being a bagger at a grocery store to being a cashier to being a fuel clerk to being a radio announcer. As you can, well, as one, we're doing this show, and two, I've done news radio for a year and a half. The experience was subpar, and I won't get into that here on this show. But nonetheless, going into now sports writing, that I've done for close to 3 years, a lot of it I feel is kind of like riding a bike, where your start is going to be tricky. There are going to be difficult times. There are going to be things that you don't quite grasp that you do later on. And that once you get going with it, it comes natural. And I feel that vending would be the same thing, from walking around all the different sections to having that persona that people would be persuaded to buy a beer, and etc.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's a little bit of a scary thing in the beginning, not the vending per se. A lot of people do vending. A lot of people that I know do it on a part-time basis or do it at their local ballpark. But to tell your family and to tell everybody around you that this is what you want to do, it's a little bit unnerving at first for people, I'm sure. But like I said, I kind of jumped into it. I didn't look back. And I took to myself and I said, what would it actually take to get to every single park and every single NFL stadium? I started out doing a few here and there, and eventually it hit me. I'm like, maybe I can be the first person ever to do this, get to every single park. You know, it became like a goal, a quest. And like I said, I love vending. I always think I'll have some element of vending in my life. I don't know if I can continue at this pace realistically. I acknowledge that it is a lot. But like I said, a lot of guys have been doing this for years and years, and it's a niche kind of thing, but it's really fulfilling. It's really fun. It's a short burst of energy that you have to expend, but I think the reward emotionally, just being a part of the game, you feel like you're there, you feel like you're contributing to the atmosphere. It's something special, and I think I fell in love with it when I first did it, and it's something I want to do long term. Again, not at this pace. I totally understand that. I recognize that it's going to be almost impossible to maintain this pace, but I still want to be a part of the game.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is that I'm sure you've been to certain major sporting events, and especially like perhaps doing the NBA Finals or doing the Stanley Cup Finals or doing the World Series. You're getting down to those lower sections, and you got to think to yourself, "Holy crap! These guys paid thousands of dollars to sit here."
Right. Absolutely. Like I said, something like the Super Bowl, something like I've done NBA Finals. This is my first Stanley Cup this year, but I've gotten to do the NBA Finals, the World Series, I've done the Belmont Stakes, so I've done 4 World Series so far. So, like I said, some of those major events, you really do kind of take it in, and you do kind of sometimes think to yourself, like, wow, it really is quite a bit to come to these events. And that's how I got started, actually. My first event was at the MLB All-Star game, or the All-Star, ceremonies with the home run derby and the All-Star game the following day.
Yeah.
But I was in Florida on vacation in 2017, and I wanted to go to the All-Star game. I took a look at the ticket prices and I said to myself, well, there's got to be another way perhaps to get in. And I took a look online. I saw an ad for an open call to come to work the 2-3 days at the All-Star game. And when I went in, they said, hey, we got a spot for you to be a hot dog vendor. Do you want to try it? Do you want to do it? And I said to myself, sure, absolutely. I'm all about the experience. And I did it day one, fell in love with it, never looked back.
Yeah, sometimes it's taking those small gigs that get you places. One of my former guests wrote obituaries for the Boston Herald, and another one of my former guests had to drive 5 hours round trip for a day of work just to get the experience. So it takes those little things that make it big. So and you're kind of getting into my next question was if you had done an MLB All Star game, you did one in Miami. Have you done any other MLB All Star games before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I did 2017, 2018, 2019. 2020 there was no game.
Right.
And then I did 22, 23, and I'm looking forward to doing this year in Texas.
Good deal. And so, which would go to my next point is that you had said that one of your favorite days was when the NHL and the NFL schedules release. I'm sure another one of your favorite days is the Wednesday after the All Star break when you get to sit back, relax, and you don't have anything to do that day because you've been at this hectic pace so long.
Right. Well, like I said, I try to I go 6 or 7 days a week during the summer. I tend to slow down between the months of January, February, and early March. I feel like once spring training kind of kicks in, then some I start to do some more events per se. But for the months of January and February, I tend to slow down. I might do local basketball, hockey, but I don't really travel for those months. I try to take those off. But like I said, from baseball season and football season as well, I'm pretty much going 6 to 7 days a week at this point right now.
Yeah, and at least in my work doing the prep sports, basketball, there were at least 2 or 3 weeks where I'm going all 5 nights each week because
Yeah.
I high school sports is more of a weekday thing, and that can you do that, it's 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then the time just flies. So
Right.
that's for
And
sure.
I'll be honest, I love baseball for the fact that there is a game almost every day. So if you really wanted to continue at that pace, you certainly can. You know what I mean? But I I do love the fact that it's not necessarily mandatory per se. So if I really wanted to take a day off, most teams aren't going to have a hard time with that or difficult time. You can kind of come and go at your own pace, which is what I like. And some vendors have different philosophies about vending. Some vendors want to try to capture every dollar and want to be there the minute the gates open. They want to try to have the opportunity to sell to every fan. And other vendors have a different philosophy where they say, well, you know what? I don't necessarily want to expend my energy until the crowd is full. And they won't begin until, right after the national anthem when most of the people are in the seats. And they say, okay, now I think I can go and sell. So, like I said, everybody has their different philosophy about how hard they want to go each day. You know.
Yeah, and I would say unless you're in Los Angeles, then most people don't get in until about the second quarter of the game because I've been to a Clippers game and Lions Rams back in 2021, and the if you took a photo right at kickoff and if you took a photo in the second quarter, it would look like two completely different stadiums because of one, the traffic, and
Right.
the
And you ask yourself,
atmosphere of Los Angeles.
right, traffic and the parking. You say, what's going on there, right? But yeah, absolutely, you're right. So, like I said, some vendors have the philosophy of I want to capture every dollar from the moment the doors open until sales are cut off, and other guys say, you know what? I'm not going to rush out there. I'm going to take my time, and when it gets busy, I'm going to start. So
There you have it. So usually Reggie will post every 5 to 7 days or so what his weekly schedule is going to be. So at least for the next 5 to 7 days after the show, what you kind of told me off air what the schedule is going to be. What's if you are listening to the show in the first 5 or 7 days since its release, where might somebody find you at and perhaps potentially buy a beer?
yeah, absolutely. So I'm still kind of tentative on the next week, but for now, like I said, tonight I will either be at a concert or at Dodgers Yankees. Saturday I will be doing another concert in New York City, Billy Joel. Sunday I'll be in St. Louis doing Cardinals, and then I'll be doing the Battlehawks playoff game following that. Monday I'll be in Florida doing the NHL Stanley Cup. Tuesday I'll be back in Philadelphia doing the Rolling Stones concert. Wednesday, I may possibly be at Tropicana Field. I'm not 100% sure yet on that. So there's a lot of moving parts, like I
Right.
said, to figure out, where I'll be, but that's the fun of this whole project, you know.
Oh, so
And I'm gonna wrap up the week in New York.
there you have it. And of course, like it said, he posts his schedule on his Instagram stories at Reg the Beer Guy, REG the Beer Guy. Follow him on Instagram. Of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TomTV23, at Tom Green Pod as well. And at this point, anything else that you might have to add to this week's show?
No, like I said, I hope that the White Sox truly get it together. Like I said, they put together an amazing experience for me to come out to Guaranteed Rate Field. And thank you to Miller Lite as well for they reached out to me when they heard about the story, and they said, "Hey, we're going to try to help you get into our parks that we have the contract for." So thank you to Miller Lite, and a huge shout out to the White Sox for putting that together. I just hope, like I said, I know they're struggling right now on the field, so I hope they get it together. And like I said, within the next year or two, I think they could turn it around like Kansas City did. I hope to see a similar trajectory to what Kansas City is doing this year.
Because just like in the NFL and the MLB, there can be some parity if the right things happen. So, and I will also say, come to Comerica Park soon because that's a little bit closer to my place than
Yes,
guaranteed.
yes. Actually, I was at Comerica Park last week when they played Toronto, and that is an amazing series to experience. Like I said, it really felt like USA versus Canada at the ballpark. It had that kind of vibe to it.
Gotcha. So, all righty, good deal. Good talking with you as always. He is Reggie Duvalsaint. Follow him on Instagram. I'll have this on Twitter as well. And this has been the Tom Green Podcast.